hog butcher for the world, tool maker, stacker of wheat, player with railroads, and the nation's freight handler. Stormy, husky, brawling city of the big show.
Yes.
Well, they tell me you're wicked. And I believe them.
Yep.
For I've seen your painted women under the gas lamps luring the farm boys. And they tell me you're crooked. And I answer, yes, it's true. I've seen the gunman kill and go free to kill again. And they tell me you are brutal. And my reply is, on the faces of women and children, I have seen the marks of wanton hunger. And having answered so, I turn once more to those who sneer at this my city, and I give them back the sneer, and I say to them, come and show me another city with lifted head, singing so proud to be alive, and coarse and strong and cunning, flinging magnetic curses amid the toil of piling job on job. Here is a tall, bold slugger among the little soft cities. Fierce as a dog with tongue lapping for action. Cunning as a savage, pitted against the wilderness. Bareheaded, shoveling, wrecking, planning, building, breaking, rebuilding, under the smoke, dust all over his mouth, laughing with white teeth, under the terrible burden of destiny, laughing as a young man laughs, laughing even as an ignorant fighter laughs who's never lost a battle, bragging and laughing that under the wrist is the pulse and under his ribs is the heart of the people. Laughing that stormy, husky, brawling laughter of youth, half-naked, sweating, proud to be hog butcher, tool maker, stacker of wheat, player with railroads, and freight handler to a nation. That's Chicago.
Chicago.
I'm curious.
By Carl Sandburg, for those people who might.
By Carl Sandburg, of course. We'll get there.
Yeah.
I'm curious. How many of you were familiar with Chicago? With the poem? And how many of you know of Carl Sandburg? How many of you know of Carl Sandburg? Yeah. I simply ask because as I get older, things that were very much entwined in my life, a part of my life, I mention the names and I get blank faces these days, and I realize that there are gaps and gaps and gaps. It was interesting tonight. Aura brought a book she said she used to use when she taught literature, and she opened it up to one of the poems I'm going to read tonight, and I said, that's great, Aura. That's wonderful. But yes, I'm talking about Carl Sandburg tonight. And I want to say when I was asked what I wanted to use as a title for the evening, I said, let's call it Carl Sandburg and Me, for just a couple of reasons. First of all, Carl Sandburg was from my hometown, Galesburg, Illinois, and we'll get into all of that in a minute. But also because we don't have a lot of time tonight, and I decided we needed a point of focus, and what I would try to do is to read 5 or 6 of his poems and try to explain what he gave to me, what I learned as a poet from him. So maybe to show that at the very beginning here, if Chicago taught me that poetry can be about rough and rugged and sometimes ugly and brutal things, and that there is pleasure in repetition, and one seeks those words, bold, brazen, bragging, those words that say in themselves what you're trying to say, then I learned a lot of that from Carl Sandburg. And just remember, I was a young kid. We're talking about back in the 30s and 40s, for example. And I was a young kid starting to write, and you got your information and you got your inspiration from somewhere. Mine came very much from Carl Sandburg. And I have to say tonight, it's a real pleasure to be here because I've kept some folders on Sandburg and some of his poems, and there have been programs along the way, but I've been away from him for a while. And it was good to get back. And it's always fun and interesting to read his poems. So over here you have Chicago, which, if anyone knew Mr. Sandburg, you would immediately think of Chicago. And I want to read another poem just to kick us off here and get this idea going of what did Mr. Sandburg contribute to me. Sometimes I run into people, and it happens to me myself, who say, gosh, I would like to write poems. I've got some poems in my head, but I don't want to, I'm curious about writing them down. I'm a little hesitant about writing them down.
No, I did not.
And Sandburg would have said, go ahead, take a chance, do what you want to do, be free, keep a pad by your bed with a pencil.
I'll see you tomorrow.
And if you have any ideas, jot them down, have fun with it. And he gives us a little poem that says that, I think. Just break the rules, have a good time, kick up your heels, in contrast to the more monumental sort of thing that is Chicago. And it's a little poem, it's fun to read. It's called A Snatch of Slip-Horn Jazz, and also gives us an idea that Sandburg liked to play on rhythms of his time, in this case, a kind of a syncopated jazz. And so this goofy little poem goes like this. Are you happy? It's the only way to be, kid. Yes, be happy. It's a good, nice way to be, but not happy, kid. Don't be too doubled up, doggone happy. It's the doubled up, doggone happy people bust hard. They do bust hard when they bust. I'll be happy, kid. Go for it. But not too doggone. See, and you can just have fun, and that's all kind of a part of it. Carl Sandburg was born in 1878 in Galesburg, Illinois, which was my hometown. I came along a little bit later in 1927. And it was a special place for him, as it was for me. It's a smallish town west of Chicago, about 50 miles from the big old Mississippi, and a college town, a quiet little college town. And one of the key things about Galesburg, Illinois was it was full of Swedes. I don't know how all those Swedes got there, but almost all my buddies were from Lindgrens and Petersons and Svansons and Svensons and Nelsons and so forth. And of course, Carl Sandburg was from a rich Swedish background. And he was a stocky man. I used to see pictures of him and eventually met him actually. And I always thought he had kind of a peasant's body, sort of stolid and solid and strong. And in later years, he had a great whisk of white hair that fell down over one of his eyes. And he was from a poor family. They had a little house over in the poor section of town, which has been preserved. And as in so many cases, a little lady from the town took this on as her project over the years to save the Sandburg house and then to restore it and then to make a little museum of it. And eventually, which will come up a little bit later, eventually in the backyard to place a large rock with a remembrance rock carved on it. And that was one of his last novels, Remembrance Rock. Sandburg, like so many of us guys, I guess from everywhere, but certainly from Galesburg, from poor families. Had a lot of jobs. Carl did a lot of things around the town. He sold shoes and he ran elevators and he worked in the cornfields. It's corn country up there. And as he got a little older, he would hop freights and go west. And he worked in the wheat fields of Kansas. He worked on ranches. And somehow tucking into his mind all this time that he was going to someday write about these things. And he did. Galesburg was, among other things, it was a train town, railroad town. We had two railway lines going through the town, the CB&Q and the Santa Fe. And it was one of those towns where when you start out to go someplace, you probably, before you got there, would have a long wait while the freight train went by. And he wrote about trains a lot too. A lot of my friends' fathers worked on the railroad. So that was Galesburg, Illinois, Sandburg's town. He left finally for Chicago and spent a number of years there working in the newspaper as a reporter. And of course, his whole writing idea and his writing style began working at this time. He married fairly early in life a lady named Paula. And she was, interestingly enough, the sister of, I think his name was Albert Steichen, a famous photographer of the time. And he had a happy family, 3 daughters. Moved eventually to Hard Rock, North Carolina. Do I have the right?
Hendersonville.
Flat Rock.
Flat Rock, North Carolina, of course.
Flat Rock.
And occupied himself not only with writing, but with raising goats. He impressed me a lot and influenced me a lot. His influences were many, and he certainly was influenced by Walt Whitman, both in terms of style of writing, the free verse, and the love of country and the feeling for the common people. And also by Vachel Lindsay, I think. I have no proof of that. Vachel Lindsay was touring the country reading his rhythmical, heavily rhythmed poems at the time. I think he must have been influenced by Vachel Lindsay as well. What I loved about Carl Sandburg was his attention to people. And he wrote about townspeople. There's lots of poems about people. Townspeople. He wrote honestly about them, I think, without being sentimental, and with great feeling. I have 2. I could read just one and make my point, I guess. But I love both of these 2 poems. And I'd like to share them with you. One is called Gone, and it goes like this. Everybody loved Chick Lorimer. Far off, everybody loved her. So we all love a wild girl keeping a hold on a dream she wants. Nobody knows now where Chick Lorimer went. Nobody knows why she packed her trunk, a few old things, and is gone. Gone with her little chin thrust ahead of her and her soft hair blowing careless from under a wide hat. Dancer, singer, a laughing, passionate lover. Were there 10 men or 100 hunting Chick? Were there 5 men or 50 with aching hearts? Everybody loved Chick Lorimer, and nobody knows where she's gone. Another one that surprises me, and certainly at the time, I thought, how can this man write so honestly about these people and dig so deeply about them? This one's called Mag, and it goes like this. I wish to God I never saw you, Mag. I wish you'd never quit your job and came along with me. I wish we never bought a license and a white dress for you to get married in the day we ran off to the minister and told him we would love each other and to take care of each other always and always, long as the sun and the rain lasts anywhere. Yes, I'm wishing now you live somewhere away from here. And I was a bum on the bumpers 1,000 miles away, dead broke. I wish the kids had never come. And rent and coal and clothes to pay for and a grocery man calling for cash. Everyday cash for beans and prunes. I wish to God I never saw you, Meg. I wish to God the kids had never come.
Oh,
Shoot.
Heavy, isn't it?
sad.
Well put.
Yeah.
Well put.
Well, there are tons of them.
Don't bring the kids.
Sandburg won 3 Pulitzer Prizes in his lifetime. The first one was for his first full, complete book of poetry. And the second one was for, he wrote a 2-part biography of Abraham Lincoln, The Prairie Years and the War Years. And for some reason, he won the Pulitzer Prize for the war years. And I think a lot of people see Carl Sandburg as a kind of a homey, down-home, folksy sort of guy, and he was. But when you look at these two volumes, you see that the research that went on to do this was incredible. So he must have been a great scholar as well. And it's beautiful. Sometimes I read the sections of the last, the cutting from the last, where he takes Lincoln's body, the train journey from Washington back to Springfield, and all along the way. And it's a gorgeous piece of writing. And his third Pulitzer Prize was, surprisingly, a little bit maybe, was for his children's stories. And he wrote children's stories. He has one series. I must say that I haven't read many of them, but he has a series. I love the title. They're called Rutabaga Stories. I just find that a great word. And I was with my cooking lady the other day at the grocery store, and we were going to make some beef stew. And I just remember, I said, oh, rutabagas are really good in beef stew. And she says, what's a rutabaga? I said, well, it's that ugly looking thing sitting up there that's hard as a rock, but it has a wonderful taste.
Jack, you used that in one of your poems, and I love that line. Like shaking around like rutabagas. Do you remember?
Oh, really? Maybe so. Maybe
No, it
so.
was one of your poems.
Oh, one of my poems?
Yes.
Oh, it's quite possible. I stole the rutabaga. But that's just another example, I think, of Mr. Sandburg's words, the wonderful words he found to name things, and those were rutabaga stories. There was an interesting incident. Carl Sandburg came back to Galesburg 2 times where I saw him. When I was there, he probably came back at other times. He would always perform one evening in a big church that was on the town square, a big Methodist church, whatever it was, and it was always jammed. And it was always a wonderful evening because he would read his poems, and he was an excellent reader. You know, not all great poets can read their things, but he was a marvelous reader. And he had an old guitar, and he played, and he sang ballads that he had written. There was just another side of him. And they were always warm evenings. But I have to tell you about an incident that I shall never forget. He had just published his biography of his growing up years. Is there a murder going on in there? He had just published his biography of his early years with a wonderful title called Always the Young Strangers. I think that's a lovely title. And he was back in town, and he held a press conference. At that time, that would have been about 1952. I think I had maybe just been to Europe, had finished my undergrad years, been to Europe, and had come back home, I think, for a little while. I'd been sending some articles back home to a weekly paper that the mother of a buddy of mine ran, Pete Creighton's mother. Mrs. Creighton ran a little paper called the Galesburg Post, and I had sent articles back to them. So I was in town, and I said, Pete, this is wonderful. We're going to go to that press conference and interview Carl Sandburg. So we immediately grabbed a copy of his book and read it, and we all showed up at the room of his hotel, and there were a few reporters around. There was also a daily newspaper in Galesburg, and probably from Quincy or Peoria or the Tri-Cities around, reporters had come, because it was a big moment. And Sandburg arrived, and the first thing he asked was, "How many of you have read my book?" Pete and I put our hands in the air, of course, and nobody else did. And I tell you, he lit into those people. He let them have it. He said, "I would never, as a journalist, have dared to interview someone without having read their book." And Pete and I felt pretty smart. And also, I will never forget, because it shows that he was really a down-to-earth guy and kind of a rascal, I think, in a way. As often happens, there was a society lady there with a very high tongue, and he asked eventually for questions. And the society lady raised her hand and nodded at her, and she said, "Oh, Mr. Sandburg," she said, "of all the precious places in Galesburg that you must have remembered, which one was your favorite?" And he looked at her directly and said, "The men's room at the YMCA." Well, that broke everybody. I thought that was wonderful. Words that sound like they say. It's part of our business, isn't it? It's part of the fun of our business, I think. And I've always wondered, why is it that so many, not all of course, but why so many words do say what they say. I think sometimes, why is cool, the word for cool, cool, and the word for hot, hot, and the word for soft, soft, and the word for hard, hard. We play with that all the time. It's certainly part of our business. And this is another of his very well-known, I wonder if you know this one, or well-known poems, called Cool Tunes. And of course, you immediately get the nice ooh sound there, which very much, I think, says what it's saying. It's a nice poem, and it shows his preoccupation in many cases with death. He wrote a lot about that. Cool Tunes, and it's such a pleasure to read it. When Abraham Lincoln was shoveled into the tombs, he forgot the copperheads and the assassin in the dust, in the cool tombs. And Ulysses Grant lost all thoughts of con men and Wall Street. Cash and collateral turned ashes in the dust, in the cool trees. Pocahontas' body, lovely as a poplar, sweet as a red haw in November or a pawpaw in May. Did she wonder? Did she remember? In the dust, in the cool tube. Take any street full of people, buying clothes and groceries, cheering a hero or throwing confetti and blowing tin horns, and tell me if the lovers are losers. Tell me if any get more than the lovers in the dust, in the cool.
Wow.
Yes, a lot of people think of Carl Sandburg, a folksy guy, as I say, he was indeed. But also interested in death, as we've seen, but also tremendously interested in the big picture, in civilizations and in humanity and where is it going. And I would like to read a longer poem here that includes some of the things we've talked about that influenced me. Certainly rhythms, certainly repetitions, certainly the use of words.